Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith and we are in the middle of a playthrough for Domain of Mirza Noctis. It is the fourth volume in the HEXplore It series. It's currently on Gamefound, and right now, if you haven't checked out any of my prior Gamefound preview series videos, you want to check out that entire playlist, which I'll put a link to in the top right hand corner. You can get yourself all caught up to where we currently are. There's one correction I want to make before we dive into this next gameplay video, and that is around the placement of the hidden crypt at the very end of the last video. You'll see the placement of that crypt I placed right here. However, where I actually received that particular crypt was on the opposite side of where I am right now. So when I had the hidden crypt and I found it as a discovery, it stated on the card to place it on the hex that you're currently in. So I should have placed it basically on the opposite side of where I'm standing right now instead of where it is. I didn't have a choice, as I had talked about, to place it anywhere I want on the hex tile that I'm on. I thought I saw the word tile in that description, but it was not on the card in the end. So we'll just be moving the crypt. It really doesn't change things. It's still just going to be one space away for us. And just like that, the crypt is now on the correct side where we originally found it as a discovery card. And now we're going to start off our round. What do we want to do? Travel by night or travel by day? This time around, I'm going to choose to travel by day. We'll see if we can get ourselves another clue on the dancing trees that already have two up there. I hope to go grab that rune. It's very close to me in the near future. So in terms of movement, seeing as the crypt that is now unlocked and ready for us, thanks to the discovery we found in the last video, we can just go ahead and move cautiously in order to get to that hex to ensure we don't wander off into the wilderness. It will give a +1 modifier to the moon die at the end of the round. Let's see how we do for our skills. Got ourselves a critical success and a 7. So I'm not getting any gold whatsoever, but this critical success here is really good because we don't have to consume any food from our pack right now, and we can choose to gain a food and then we get to heal 1 lost energy, or 1 hero heals 1 critical wound. I'm really leaning towards the latter. I'd rather knock one of the critical wounds off. We currently have 2. Remember, if we hit 5, we're going to die, so I'd rather keep that low, especially being that we're heading towards a crypt and heading into a dungeon. I don't know what may happen when we head in there. So let's go ahead and actually knock that critical wound down by 1. Our current food rating is quite low, so I'm going to go ahead and consume 1 meat pie, and it's going to allow me to go ahead and bump this up by its food rating, so 1 will go to a 3, but first I need to go ahead and suffer 2 energy damage whenever you consume a meat pie. We took the 1 energy hit, we've lost a meat pie, we bumped up our food rating. Now, based on our party, or our one character, the warlock here, moving from the monastery to the crypt, which is adjacent to us, just 1 space. We move there cautiously. We're now moving into the event phase where we can interact with the crypt fully. We know we're in the event phase currently at the crypt because when you are on the crypt, you skip the circumstance phase while we're here. The first bullet reads. The rest of the bullets talk about if you find a crypt on the game board to place one of the locked crypt tokens on it. Of course, when you first go to a crypt that is locked, you need to actually gain access to the crypt in order to interact with it. So in this case, we don't have to worry about that because we found a hidden crypt. It was a discovery card in our night bar, and when we found it, it was stated that that particular crypt was unlocked. So we already have access to it, we already have a dungeon tile laid out, and we're ready to explore inside of it. But if you find a crypt that is locked, these are the ways you can actually gain access. You can expend a crypt key, and of course if it has that icon, you can get in. One way to find one, as an example, would be to take down an enemy that actually in the rewards section literally shows a key, and you can use a key you found and keep track of it here on the battle mat. Once you get to a crypt, you can use that key to gain access. Another option, if you don't have a key on you and you still want to try to gain access, is almost, in a way, almost like lockpicking the crypt, and that is during the skills section. If you can succeed on all 3 of your skill checks, and obviously the odds will be higher once your character has bolstered up those particular stats, navigate, explore, and survival. If you succeed in all 3, you can unlock that crypt. So that's pretty cool as well. And down here, exiting to a locked crypt from inside the dungeon also unlocks it. So essentially, when we go into this unlocked crypt down into the dungeon, we could come out at a different crypt that then unlocks it. Now, another really cool thing you can do while visiting crypts is you can activate runes. So here you can see activating runes. You'd mark the rune type on the table below and add to the number of total activations on the below right, which is this area right here. Every second one that you put in is going to gain the group an additional power-up card on top of the one they always get when they activate a rune. So every time you activate a rune, always grab a power card here, but every second one you're going to get an additional power-up card. That's really going to progress your character a lot. Of course, you need the runes in order to make that happen. And then on top of that, there's benefits here for activating sets and end of game bonuses, which of course are going to allow you to reduce the blood pool, which again is going to power down Noctis for that confrontation. It's worth talking about another section on this crypt card because it is here, and we have touched on this before, but I'll go over this again. Blood magic. So we currently start at tier number 1 as we're playing true solo, so we have access to these 3 spells right here, and as it states on here, the group may learn to perform more blood magic spells. For each tier you attain, you just go ahead and tick that number up. You then go to the deck and pull it, and now you have an additional spell you can actually perform. There's going to be a number of these, so I'll show you a couple cards. We'll shuffle these back in at the end, but you can see, for instance, Infernal Heat. This one costs 1 critical health. Raise an ally's health equal to your tier +2. At tier 3, raise their energy by an equal amount. So all these different spells are going to allow for different things. Currently, I don't have any reason to use some of the ones that I have access to down here, but they could come in really handy. As you can see, something like being able to spend some critical health to revive a dead hero. If you happen to be playing, of course, with 2 heroes and one of them is down. You've also got Kiss of Darkness, Body Control. There's different ways these spells are going to impact the game and give you some positives. So we're currently at the crypt, and we don't gain access to the dungeon here in order to go down to that tile until the start of the next turn. So we have to be on the crypt, and then we're able to move into the dungeon. So we'll have to wait till the next round. But what I can do is prepare a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is, knowing full well that if I happen to camp in the current spot that I am, knowing that I want to stay still and go into the dungeon for the next round, I'm going to go ahead and consume 2 more meat pies, which will knock off some more energy, but it's going to boost up my food rating in preparation. So that has been completed. My food rating is now all the way up to 7. Energy's down to 6. I only have a single meat pie left now, but I know when I camp on the next round, I'm going to be able to heal some health and some energy 3 back in both categories, which will bring my energy back up to full, which is the reason why I ate a certain amount of meat pies. And again, I want to stay put, but we are done now with the event phases. I have no more runes to activate or I need to do anything else at the crypt currently. So we're going to go ahead and roll for Noctis. The blood pool has ticked up another 3, so we're currently at 10 now. I'm going to roll the moon die and add 1 to the roll. Let's find out what happens here. We got ourselves a 5, so that's going to be a 6. It says group +2 penalty to stat tests made next game turn. So as we're choosing to go ahead and camp this turn, we are not going to be moving, and instead each hero heals 3 and 3 for energy and health. So I'm going to jump myself energy-wise back up to 9, and we're going to roll our skills, just rolling our Explore and Survival. We don't have to worry about Navigate. It also says to gain a -1 bonus to all skills rolled this turn. So let's go ahead and find out how we do here. Got ourselves a 6 and a 3, so this becomes a 2 and a 5. This ends up working out really good for us because we were successful on our survival, which means we don't have to consume any food. We still haven't found any gold off that Explore die, and like I mentioned, because we can't, we gain back our energy. Beginning our turn on the crypt allows us to access the dungeon because it is unlocked. So we can choose to enter this if we want. As with most of the major elements of the game, there is a reference card for this area as well, which will give you really good information on the left here you'll want to go through, as well as the new game turn sequence you'll be following rather than the regular phases we've gone through in the past. So we'll be starting off right here, and the first thing we need to do is determine how much time we have in this dungeon, and that is going to be a combination of your Navigate skill along with your Explore skill. So in my case, my Navigate is 2, my Explore is 3, so I'll have a total of 5 time. Now let's quickly talk about some of the important aspects of a dungeon. Of course, you'll see some of these as we move through it. It states here, each game turn, the group has an amount of time, which we've determined is 5, equal to the highest Navigate and Explorer rank combined from one hero, and each hex of movement costs 1 time as we move through the dungeon. Search for and place a dungeon tile that contains a matching crypt number from the crypt. We don't have to worry with this because we already had that stuff set up from the hidden crypt card. If the dungeon tiles are already in play and you enter from a new crypt, one wall side of the new entry must be placed adjacent to another existing dungeon wall. Dungeon tiles do not connect to any other map tiles. We've kept them separate. You'll see that in a second. So you'll never connect a dungeon tile to the main map, essentially. You may exit the dungeon by moving to a hex with a crypt icon. So as we go ahead and move through the dungeon, we are hopefully going to go ahead and find another crypt entrance, or I should say exit in that case. And if we find another exit which leads to a crypt that we currently don't have a hex tile for, then that hex tile will come into play in order for us to leave it, and it's going to give us almost in a way a shortcut through the map from one side to the other, which is pretty cool. Every time we move to the edge of a dungeon tile, we draw a random dungeon tile and place it. We orientate it so that the new tile, so we can actually allow us to move into it correctly. Of course, there's walls inside the dungeon. I'll talk about that when we run into it. And then we roll to place rune stones. You'll see there are dies that correspond to each of the color of rune stones, as well as cards that correspond to those runes. And we'll be rolling to determine where on the dungeon tile those runes are going to rest. And as you've likely noticed, we've got 2 standard dies for the red and green runes, a moon die for the blue rune, and of course, if anything goes result-wise over 7, well, that particular rune's not going to be placed. If we do happen to get the same value on 2 runes, the first one is going to go in the first position, and then the second one is going to go onto adjacent space beside it, and we get to choose which adjacent space that is. As I noted, the game turn sequence completely changes in the dungeon, so now the first phase is we move our heroes or rest, we get to choose, and then the second phase we resolve a rune stone, an event phase, and of course if we're in a space with a rune and it's of a particular color, we go to the deck, the corresponding one you can see on screen. If it's red, we grab from the red deck. The red deck is generally combat scenarios. If you're on a green rune, you're interacting with that. They're a mix of good and bad and some traps, and then the rune that won't land in the dungeon as often, because when you're placing your runes, this one's going to be rolled with a moon die, is the balloon ones. So there's definitely positives to getting those blue ones, but there is a mimic inside this deck which is going to cause you problems. Once you've gone past the 2 phases I just talked about, you move to the villain phase, and Noctis will go ahead and activate as normal. So without further ado, let's start exploring this dungeon and see what we find. Noric Strain is heading into the dungeon, and the other thing to note is that again, I placed a dungeon tile quite a bit ago when the hidden crypt was discovered. When the first dungeon tile is laid, those runes are rolled for. So even this very first location, as it was created from that hidden crypt card, would also have die rolls associated to it, which means runes could drop here. Let's go ahead and roll for these runes one at a time. We're going to start with the red rune. Let's find out whether it drops. And again, we'll be using that hex grid that's on the dungeon reference card to determine where it goes if we happen to land within 1 through 7, which we did for the first one. It's going to be in the 5th position, which would actually place it right here. I'm already getting excited about these dungeons. Let's go ahead and roll the second one. This is going to be for green. We got ourselves a 3, so that is going to land right here. And finally, the one that's least likely to drop is going to be a blue rune, so let's see how it goes. Come on, give me something good. 6, look at that. And that, my friends, is how you roll the dice. So when you are trying to drop runes in a dungeon, we already have a ton of them to go after here. So the first thing we're going to do here is do some movement and knock down our time based on that movement, but we have to be careful of walls in dungeons. I'm going to go ahead and show you a whole bunch of walls on this current tile I'm in. I'm going to remove this entrance so you can actually see them. Do you see these walls going all the way around here? Even though I've got a blue rune here and a red one here, I have no way to access those currently. I can't go through a wall from where I'm currently at in the center hex to get to the blue or red one. The only one I can actually get to right now is the green one, and I'd have to work my way by basically exploring the dungeon to get to the opposite side to connect into one of these other entrances to get back there. So you can't just, even though this is kind of an exciting start, I'm gonna have to work my way back there if I really want that blue one, blue being the best rune you can likely get. We're gonna go ahead and move into the space with the green rune, as that's the one I can currently access, and the second we move into that space, we then draw a new tile from the dungeon deck in order to determine what we get, and I can place this in any orientation that I want. Top one off the deck is this one. Pretty wild. There's a lot going on here. As you can see, there's all kinds of walls all over the place. This is actually a great dungeon tile to get. This is the orientation I wanted in, and I'll talk about why. So if I go ahead and just move this rune out of my hex, you can see there is a wall here jutting out, but because of the way I've orientated this hex, I can move across into this space right here on the new one and be able to actually gain access to another crypt. And if I go through that other crypt, I'm actually going to be able to pull the hex tile that corresponds to that crypt into my game world, and it automatically unlocks, which is pretty awesome. The other thing to make note of, which you may or may not know at this point, is remember those categories of items at the monastery in terms of unlocking crypts to gain access to not only the ability to upgrade gear slots on your character, but also new sets of items that were found that Noctis has locked away in these crypts. Well, even if you don't have the keys, just by unlocking these crypts, you're gaining access to additional items to purchase in the monastery and gear slots. The orientation of this tile is perfect for me right now, and why? Because I've gained the ability to have my individual, if I want, move into here and then start moving back to the other runes that are hidden in the back there. I could also technically move from here into this area at some point, do a stat check through a secret passage, which is one way to actually get through walls where you otherwise cannot, in order to access a level 8 boss, which I'm not necessarily really aiming to go after right now, as I'm not strong enough, I don't believe, to handle a level 8. It would crush me. But this crypt being right here in close access is pretty cool. With a new dungeon tile in play, we now have to roll to find out where the runes are going to land on this one. Hopefully, they're going to land on the side that's even easier to access, but we'll see. The odds are probably against us there. First one we're going to roll for is the red one. Let's see if it lands at all. We got a 10, so that is no rune for red. Moving on to green with a standard die roll. Got ourselves a 2. That one landed right on the crypt door. That's pretty awesome. And then the moon die for blue is going to be a 5. The blue rune landed right on top of the level 8 boss. Phase 1 is now done. I've already started phase number 2, which is to reduce the amount of time based on the hexes we've moved. We moved 1 hex, so we went down from 5 to 4. Now we're going to grab a green dungeon card, as we're currently on a green rune, and we're going to do our resolving of a runestone. And let's see what we get. We got ourselves what's called the Dusty Journal. A thin journal held by a skeletal hand grabs your attention. It appears this individual was attempting to investigate agents of Noctis. Choose one non-bounty investigation in play. Gain its rune reward. That's amazing. As though you have completed it and then discard it. One thing that I'd like to quickly correct is the fact that I had a +2 penalty to stat test thanks to Noctis last round. It told me that this current round I get a +2. So that means that even though my results on the dice were reduced by 1 each because I camped, they're going to go back up 2 because of the penalty, which is going to make this 5 a 7, which doesn't matter because I'd failed it anyway. But what does matter is it changes this from a 2 to a 4, which makes me fail the survival roll, which means I do need to consume some food, so I'll be going from 7 down to 5. I'm going to go ahead and resolve Full Moon, and this is the one I'm choosing. It's not a bounty. Thanks to that Dusty Journal, I get the rune without having to deal with it at all, so it's this one right here. Going to gain it right now. This card will be discarded, and a new one will take its place. So let's do that and find out what's going to be in this position. The next one up is going to be, oh yes, we knew this as we had set up the fortune teller, the Waterfall of Transformation. A really cool card. Now, as you'll see right on the card, it says to place the waterfall token on the closest waterfall on the map. We know we're currently in the crypt, but working from that crypt hex we're currently in, we'll find the closest waterfall. Now, taking a look for the closest waterfall from the crypt location that I'm currently inside of, the one that's closest to me is all the way over here in the mountain range, which is actually just beside where we began our adventure. So I'm going to be going ahead and placing this special hex right on top of it for the waterfall of transformation. Now, I want to show you guys something pretty incredible. That boss that we found in here, as you can see, 8, this level 8 boss is this individual right here. This is an undead Goliath, someone you do not want to be dealing with right now. As you can see, health and stamina very high. It actually holds a crypt key with it, has a ton of power-up cards, a bunch of gold, a bunch of food. You gain your first mastery up by 5. You get a +1 on the blood magic tier. This is a big-time boss, and another reason why I will not be going after that position even though the blue rune is on it. Now, you may think the second that you resolve one of these dungeon cards that you just gain the associated rune that's sitting in the space you're in. You do not. You actually gain the card that you resolved, and as you can see right on the card, it will tell you that you need to collect 2 of these types of cards in order to get a rune of that color. You'll keep these cards and you can cash 2 of them in as a green rune, for instance, at places like the crypt, the monastery, and other areas that accept them, as we've seen prior. So I really want to go ahead and try and collect another green rune, and there happens to be one sitting right on the crypt exit, I should say. It's 2 hexes away, and we definitely have the time to get there. It's also extremely tempting to try and go for the red one, but if we go for the red one, it's 2 spaces away from where I currently am, and then from the red one all the way back to the green exit of the crypt would be 3 more. So we wouldn't have enough time unless, of course, we were lucky enough to find additional time gained somehow down in the dungeon, which I don't want to bank on. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. So what I might do is just head right for that crypt exit. But of course, before we get too excited as to what we plan to do next, we still have to go through a villain phase. So the blood pool is increasing by 3 again because of the blood collectors, up to 13 now. We're rolling the moon die here. We're adding 2 because we camped that modification. We got ourselves a 3 that's going to turn into a 5, and it states 1 piercing health damage. I can completely live with that. That's not a big deal. We're moving back into another round here in the dungeon, and we're going to be moving towards the crypt exit. So even though I am very excited to continue exploring down and around here, we're going to get ourselves out while we still have the time to do so. Again, as I said before, if I move 2 here, it burn 2 time, and then of course trying to get back to the exit wouldn't really pan out perfectly. So what I'm going to do is just head right out, and again, if we get this other green one, the great news is we'll actually end up having a single green rune. So we made it to the exit. We are currently on it, and we've lost 2 time as we got there. Now we're going to go ahead and interact with that rune, and then we're going to be exiting this dungeon. Let's find out what this green rune has for us. We'll grab a green dungeon card, and let's find out what it is. Oh, that doesn't look good. It's a trap. Sleep darts. It has a time consumption up here of 1. I believe the good one we got earlier actually had a 0 here, or nothing was there. Yeah, because it was a positive thing. This one, so you will see bad cards come through. The red ones, as I mentioned, have more combat encounters. Green's more of a mix, and blue is kind of like all positive for the most part, except for just a couple cards in there. But there's usually time consumption going on as well, so you can have cards that can burn a lot of time on you. Thankfully, I'm already heading towards the exit. I've already knocked myself down 2 times from the move I did, so I have 2 left. This one's going to cost me 1 more, and what else does this say? So group survival. So we're doing a survival check. My survival currently is a rating of 2. I have to roll the die. The other nasty thing is I have a +2 penalty to my stat chest, so technically it doesn't matter. I have a stat value of 2. I can't even possibly pass this, so we don't even have to roll for this, as I'm not going to be able to succeed at it anyway. But actually, well, yeah, even with my Yeah, there's nothing I can do in this situation. So it says increase the time spent on this event by 1 for each hero who fails. So basically this time consumption is going to go from 1 to 2 on me, which will burn the rest of the time that I have away, and double the total time spent if all heroes fail. Well, regardless, all my time is being burnt, but we have dealt with the sleeping darts. So once this has been dealt with, we can choose to actually keep the card, which I'm going to do. And now I've got 2 of them, and I can actually cash both of these in for a green rune, which you don't need to actually take a rune and place it in your inventory. There's a slot on the battle map to actually keep track of this stuff. So my time has dropped down to 0. These 2 cards are being cashed in to collect 1 rune. That rune is going to be green. So right up here on the battle mat, you'll see a red area to keep track of the red runes, green and blue. So we got a green one. We'll go ahead and just place 1 right there. So we know now that we dealt with the green rune that we're on a crypt space. It does state right here that you may exit the dungeon by moving to a hex with a crypt icon, which we have. Move the group to that crypt location on the map and resume the event phase. Inside the rulebook, it states if that crypt number doesn't exist currently out in the main world, you're going to find the hex tile that actually corresponds to the crypt you found, and you're going to be unlocking it and walking through it back into the open world. I've gone ahead and found the tile that corresponds to crypt number 1, and it's hex tile H. When you're placing your hex tile, you get to choose where it's placed in the game world. So for my purposes, I'm going to place it on the opposite end where we haven't been before, and I've also orientated it in a way that I'm happy with, and the crypt is right here. So Noric Strain comes out, and we move right into the event phase at that crypt. So we came out at a crypt. Another thing I want to correct here is we gained a red rune, an actual token, and instead of actually keeping the token, and this happened earlier on, remember we got that card where we were able to take any single rune off the main map and just acquire it? Well, I just took the actual token and placed it on my board, so instead I'm going to cash this thing in and actually go ahead and place a 1 up here to denote we have 1 red rune and 1 green one now. We are at the crypt during the event phase, so we could activate some runes. This is going to be a lot of fun. I've gone ahead and I'm going to cash in my red rune and my green rune in order to tick off 2 boxes in here, a red and a green, and that's 2 activations, which we'll go ahead and place a 2 in here, and that 2 then matches the first bonus, because as soon as we have that second one in there, not only are we getting the power up for 1 here, power up for another one here, but we get this bonus here, which is another group power up for every other activation, and we gain twice its bonus. The first card we get is Defend. At first they said they only wanted the sick, but more are disappearing each day. So a 2 to defense is going to be a huge boost. 4 to 6 is what we're going to. Next, we're going to get a +1 to first mastery and our survival stat. That's pretty nice. So the arcane bolt's going to go from 6 to 7. Survival's going to go from 2 to 3. And the final one is the group power-up bonus, where we get twice its bonus. So our second mastery is actually going to go up 2, and our navigate's going to go up 2. So the Eldritch Siphon will go from 5 to 7. Our Navigate will go from 2 to 4. So after all those boosts, we are definitely looking quite a bit better now. We got a bump in defense, a bump on the first and secondary mastery, a bump on Navigate and Survival. We're heading into the villain phase, so Noctis is going to activate. We've moved the blood pool from 13 up to 16 thanks to the blood collectors. No modification to this roll. We got ourselves, wow, a 1. All right, so with a 1 on this, it says each hero loses 1 gold or 2 food. Well, I guess in this case we have no gold, so 2 food it is. So my food has dropped down to 3. It's also worth mentioning that I removed a +2 stat boost that Noctis had thrown at me, and one correction I want to make is when we were at the very tail end of the dungeon there and we had those poison darts essentially coming at us, at that particular point when we did the survival check, at that point I could have actually rolled to be successful there, as the +2 had already been technically removed as it was a new game turn. I played it as though that +2 was still in effect, and it actually wasn't. So I had a chance to actually not have to deal with that. However, we've moved past it at this point, but I wanted to make mention of it for those that caught it. One other thing I wanted to get up to speed is my arcane damage has gone up. When we jump this up to 7, we're now doing twice the arcane bolt worth of damage, so now it's a total of 14 damage here. I'd already gone ahead and bumped these up. This is now a total of 2 plus 7, so that makes 9 when we do my second mastery. So we have some decent attacks here, and I'm getting a little bit interested in potentially going after maybe one of the first bosses. So maybe we'll move towards a random boss encounter and see how things go. So seeing as though we're on the other side of the world right now and we're really close to this location right here, guess which one that is? It's the Dark Fae, one we have some clues towards the investigation to help us with reducing its outlast, and the Dark Fae is a level 1 enemy. This could be a perfect time to do regular movement of 4 to get there and go after this very first boss. So I'm obviously going to choose to move at night because I could potentially roll a 3 on the circumstance and get an additional clue here. We'll see if that happens to pan out. We'll also be doing normal movement to this location. All right, let's go ahead and roll our skill dice for normal movement. So that's green, yellow, and blue, all 3. See how we do. All right, wow, that was a real big time fail on the survival. We got a pass on the navigate. That's good. Our navigate skills, our stat, I should say, is at 4, so we pass it, which means we won't wander. That's a plus. We also get some gold. Hey, we don't have any gold. That's nice. So we're not wandering anywhere, which is fantastic. We gained 2 gold for the Explorer. That's great. And on survival, we had to consume 2 food, so I dropped from 3 down to 1. Now we're going to roll on the night bar, find out what we get. We don't want to see an encounter. That's a 5 or a 6. If we get a 3, that would be incredible, but highly unlikely. Let's see. Well, I guess it's not highly unlikely. It's only a D6. We might have a chance. We got a 2. Super close. Waterfall of Transformation gets a clue. And this is where I need to make a correction because no clue is placed. You interact with the discovery as we've seen discoveries before. However, because I'm crazy, I went ahead earlier on in the playthrough the second this thing came out and placed the waterfall already in play. Good thing there was no gameplay impact because I didn't actually head there anyway. The only thing that could actually change things is if there's a waterfall closer to my current location that I should place this at, and as of right now, there actually is. There's actually quite a few waterfall locations to where I am right now that are much closer than the one that's over here. So instead, I'm going to go ahead and place this right here. So again, there wasn't any gameplay impact in the sense of me actually going to that special locations and making use of it before I discovered it. I just accidentally placed it out on the game world a little bit in advance. So we'll go ahead now and reveal what's supposed to be in that second slot next. That is going to be Body Puzzles. And that card is actually going to place a rune right here, a blue one. Circumstance phase is done. We're moving to the event phase, and I'm in a location where there is a bounty. It's the Dark Fae. As you can see here, for each clue, I'm going to knock down the outlast value of the Dark Fae by 1, so it'll be knocked down by 2. So I've got ourselves set up for the Dark Fae battle with this boss. We got a 20 health, 25 energy. Outlast is at 1. It is 2 plus 1 per hero, so it'd normally be 3, but thanks to the 2 clues in the investigation, it's dropped down by 2, so it's just 1. The Dark Fae is classified as magical nature. My favorite opponent is a creature, so no bonus there in that situation with the hex die. But looking on the right-hand side here, we have a bunch of rewards, so group and single all come to me if I take this thing down. This one here allows me to pull a tile of any size and place it. That's pretty awesome. I've got some power-ups, a couple of those. We got 5 gold, 6 food. We get a boost of 3 to our energy stat if we take it down. Plus, we would get a Fey Dragon Familiar, which would be pretty cool. The one thing to note for the Dark Fae before we get into combat is this passive ability right here. This one down below will not be in effect because it's for moderate difficulty. So Fae Illusions is something we'll be dealing with. It says the Dark Fae has a number of illusions equal to its Outlast, and we know that value is at 1 currently. Its Outlast does not automatically decrease at the end of every round, so that's something to keep note of. And whenever the Dark Fae suffers damage, roll the Moon die. If the result is equal to or lower than its illusions, it negates the damage damage, and its Outlast and Illusions are going to be reduced by 1. Heroes who target its Outlast resolve their action before their other allies and opponents. We won't have to worry about that because we're playing true solo and I don't have any kind of allies or anybody else with me. The Dark Fae is not vanquished if its Outlast reaches 0. So the way Outlast is handled with this particular individual is different than others. Meaning I'm going to be going into this battle with a big time focus on taking out its health, which is 20. So we're going to be going into this. I'm hoping I can come out on top. We have some really powerful attacks now. 14 damage Arcane Bolt we can pull off. We've also got a decent 9 damage Eldritch Siphon we can potentially use. Now our attack, a regular attack here for 2 is pretty low. That's something I'd love to bump up in the future, but for now we'll probably bank on our masteries to get us through this one. So as an example here, I've grabbed an encounter randomly just so you guys can see that an Outlast value can be on the encounter cards, as we've likely seen already in the playthrough, but also on the bosses, and the Outlast value can actually be used differently across multiple enemies. So in this case, if we were attacking the Vampire Bats, we would have the 3 stats in the top right-hand corner up here that we could roll against. You'd only be picking one of them to make a roll against, and if you succeed, the benefit of that against this particular encounter is you can see the associated icon right there underneath each one of these options when you roll the hex die. That means if I succeeded at this particular check for Outlast, because that's what I chose to do during my combat, I would have an impact on the Outlast value and also be able to negate if I happen to roll a hex that lands, for instance, 5 and 6. If I was rolling the navigate die and I succeeded at it, I'd be able to negate this completely and not have to deal with it if the hex die landed there. So there's other benefits to this whole Outlast thing depending on the type of individual or creature you're going up against. However, with the Dark Fae, we don't get things like that. In other words, if I make an Outlast check on one of these 3 stats here and I succeed on it, you'll note that in each of the different options that could come up on this hex die, when rolled, there is no corresponding icon to negate that row or that attack coming back at us. So we don't get that benefit with the bosses, but we do get to reduce the Outlast, and that will have an effect on the number of illusions the Dark Fae has, which in turn will help us defeat it. One thing I've already gone ahead and done is spent my energy in the declaration phase here. I'm going to go ahead and, because I'm playing true solo, get the ability to defend at half rank, so it'll be a 3. That costs 1 energy, dropping me from a 9 to an 8. Another energy is going to be spent for the Arcane Bolt, because I want to do a big time attack right now when the Outlast value is really low, because of all the wonderful clues that we found towards the investigation of this bounty that involves the Dark Fae, and that's another energy hit, which dropped me from 8 to 7. Now we need to determine what is going to happen for the Dark Fae. Let's roll and find out. We got ourselves a 3. So we'll take a look down here. You'll see Manifestation. Now there's a few things to note here. You'll see that the actual one we landed was the first mastery of this boss. It's going to take 4 energy away, so I'll be reducing 25 down to 21. If the individual runs out of energy and lands this in the future, there is a tiny little combat symbol beside it that lets you know that's the alternative that this individual will use if it runs out of energy to do this attack. It would then backtrack and do this one, the Surround and Strike. But for now, this will still happen. You can see triples, the first word in this statement, but when you're playing true solo, it's only going to hit you 1 time. Dual and triple don't have any additional stacking effects in terms of how many times they're going to hit you. So this is only going to come through once. It says each target suffers energy drain equal to twice the number of illusions. The illusions is based on the Outlast value, which is 1, so twice that is 2. So I've taken the 2 energy hit here. I've also reduced the energy for that particular attack, and I'm resolving it now as well. So I'm happy with that. That actually wasn't too bad, because again, the Outlast value was so low. Now, if that had gone in as normal with this, again, didn't have any clues on the bounty investigation, it would have been at a 3 to start, which means that would have been a 6 energy drain out of the gate, which would have been pretty nasty. This gives me a window of opportunity to potentially take this out quickly if I can pull it off. It also didn't put up any defense, so all 14 of the damage is going to go on its health, bringing it down to 6. Now the Dark Fae does have a saving grace here. I've gone ahead and scratched it off as if the 14 went through, but remember, as I talked about before, Fae illusions are going on here, so I may actually miss this. Now the only way I'm going to miss this is if I roll on a moon die and land the same or less value than the number of illusions that this Dark Fae has, which is based on its Outlast value of 1. So I literally just have to roll a 1, and this Dark Fae is going to, I'm going to basically be shooting this attack off in the wrong direction. So here we go. go. Hope to not see a 1, but I got good odds that it won't be that, hopefully. All right, we got ourselves an 11, so we're safe. So that damage does, in fact, get through. I can tell you right now, I'm feeling pretty good about this. I'm going to continue to throw the Arcane Bolt at it because I might be able to take this thing down before it has a chance to boost its Outlast value. I've looked through a number of the different potential things that could happen here, and the Dark Fae does have ways of generating an uptick in Outlast, which can make it extremely tough to then land hits. So I need to make use of the fact it is very low in order to put as many hits against it and take it out as quick as possible. So I've already spent the energy for my half defense as well as my Arcane Bolt. We're rolling the die here to find out what the Dark Fae is going to do. And also another thing to notice, I mentioned earlier, the Fae Illusions and the Outlast and how it resolves. Normally the Outlast value would tick down by 1 at the end of every combat round, but with the Dark Fae it does not. So it's still currently at a 1 as it notes up here. Rolling the die, we got the exact same value we had last time. I've already gone ahead and taken the 2 energy drain that comes from the manifestation. I haven't reduced the energy any further, and I should have. So another 4 is going to come off of here, bringing us down to 17. And now we're going to roll the moon die to see whether this 1 illusion that it has is going to have me miss my attack. I'm really hoping it doesn't, because if it does get through, we actually kill this boss off. So here we go. And it rolled right off screen. I will move it slowly so you can see I'm not tipping anything. That is a 5, so that attack gets straight through and the Dark Fae has been taken down. Now, just before we get all excited and grab our rewards for taking down the boss, I wanted to show you up close all the different types of attacks that could have come my way. We got the manifestation twice, but there was a chance there we could have gotten anything else here. This one's a straight up attack against health, gives piercing. The 1 Fae army actually bumps up the Outlast value by 3 and defends equal to its rank, which is crazy in terms of a rank of illusions or the number of illusions it has. So that can really start stacking up to the point where you're just missing all your attacks because of the number of illusions in play. And then, of course, manifestation, we've seen false allies really starts talking about negating, healing, boosting, and really just ignoring some of the effects that we're throwing at it. Heart attack here is going to be pretty interesting. It throws an attack plus a stat check. Exploding clones is really bad because it throws 2 temporary illusions at you that last to the end of the round, among other things. So you can read through this to get an idea of all the other nasty things that could have potentially happened. But again, because we went into this in a bounty investigation with 2 clues, the Outlast was reduced, making the whole fight just a bit easier. But also remember, this is a level 1 boss. So we are a little bit more equipped and ready to handle this kind of an individual quite quickly based on our attack values. We could probably start handling 2s and 3s at this point without too much worry, but it really can go sideways based on these charts. Now let's go ahead and get our rewards. You can see up top here, we're going to get a hex tile. That's what that one stands for. Basically means you can pull one of any size you want and place it on the world map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one of the larger ones because I want something really nice. And we're going to take the top one off here. It is an M, and it actually comes with a crypt as well, which will be locked. We'll take a look to see if anything in any of the rows in terms of runes need to be placed here. Now, before we get to that, let's go ahead and continue with the rewards. We get some power-up cards, 2 of them, in fact. So I'm going to draw one off the top. We got Survival. Survival is going to go up by 1. We also get a -1 modifier to Noctis's roll this round. So that's actually another thing that's worth noting is you will have cards that come through the gameplay that will modify that villain phase at the end. Keep an eye on those. And then we've got a oh, that's huge, a +3 in energy. That's awesome. That worked out perfectly in terms of what was in the shot. Survival jumped from 3 to 4, and then over here we had a boost from 9 to 12 for energy. We also get to bump up our current energy by that value as well, so from 1 to 4. Next up, it says we're getting 5 gold and 6 food, so 5 gold plus 2 is 7, and then we had 1 food remaining. We got 6, so we're up to 7 on that one as well. On top of that, we also get an additional +3 energy to our stat, bumping us to 15 and 7. I really didn't expect to actually have more energy than health after this battle. And also a really cool reward is this familiar right here. The Fey Dragon Familiar is now ours. Familiars are helpful allies that assist their heroes. They're rewarded in many situations, and this is a good example of one of them. Sometimes they can be purchased by the heroes as well. Each familiar is unique and may only be gained once per game. Heroes may possess more than one familiar at a time, and unless otherwise stated, may trade their familiars to other heroes outside of combat. A familiar's rank begins equal to 1 plus 1/3 the receiving hero's matching stat rank. Unless otherwise stated, familiars may not be targeted in combat. So you can take a look right inside the actual watermarked area of the stat. It states lowest stat when gained. So we just gained this. Our lowest stat is actually our attack, our basic attack. It's set at 2, so that's exactly what's going to go right there. Fey Touch states, once per game turn, when you or an ally heals a target's health, that target also gains regen 1 health for the next 2 rounds, or they heal 1 critical wound. It even has mentions here of the major milestones it just talked about throughout all of this, and I'll read the next paragraph in a second, but I want to mention regen is captured right here to the right of your vitals. That'll help you to remember to take advantage of those when you get them. Down below it says, at rank 3 and every 3 ranks after, increase this regen by 1, so it gets better and better. At rank 7, any healing that exceeds a target's maximum health is halved and converted to energy. At rank 10, the ability may be used up to 3 times per game turn. Now, when your regen is connected to your character directly, you'll use these regen slots right here, but there's also a regen slot right on the familiar itself. Will also let you know how much you actually get. So just be careful of that. Remember that the regen value that you get currently for me starts at 1 because I haven't even hit rank 3 yet, but once I hit rank 3 with this familiar, I'll be able to add an additional regen value to this right here, bumping me up to a 2, and that just is a quick reminder of what I can get from this card, and also quick reminders here as to when things will continually increase. Now you're likely wondering, how do I upgrade my familiar? Well, it's quite easy. When I went ahead and gained this familiar, it told me what stat to put in here, and in this case it said the lowest stat when gained. So for me, that was my attack stat, which is currently at a 2, so I placed it in here, and you need to reference that and remember it. You can even write it here on the card if you need to. The reason you want to keep it in mind, if it's not obvious like this one and you have a selection, you can even go ahead and mark it by putting an X there. So for instance, of all these different stats, this is the one that I actually took into consideration to make that 2 happen. Going forward, whenever I get a power-up card that actually corresponds to that stat, instead of placing it on my hero, I can actually place it on the familiar instead. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and place the hex tile that I gained from my rewards. I placed the hex tile as I want. The crypt is locked up tight, and there's no runes on this M tile. We also don't want to forget about the bounty card itself, giving us a green rune and also telling us at the bottom we need to replace it with an aid investigation from the night deck, and then we shuffle other cards back into the deck once we found one. After searching through the deck for an aid card, I found an Interrupt Aid Falconer card. It says the Falconer joins the group, bring him to the location shown on the right. The Falconer has arrived right where the green rune is, right here in the mountains. Now let's move into the villain phase. The only modifier coming into play is from the survival bonus that I got from before. It's a -1. We move normally at the beginning of this game turn, so no modifier there. We also need to uptick the blood pool from 16 up to 19. As you can see, we are very close to the very first marker here, which is going to boost up Noctis for the end of the game. You'll see it's going to give him an Aegis of 2, and when you're going up against opponents that have Aegis, they are much more difficult to harm. They're represented by an orange shield, as you can see there, and it replaces the opponent's shield level. So heroes are going to only be able to deal health damage to these opponents if they have a number of attack gear upgrades equal to or greater than half the Aegis value rounded up, or if the opponent's energy level is down to 0. Unless otherwise specified, the Aegis value is equal to the opponent's level. So it just adds another level to the battle. Now, as the blood pool increases over the course of your game, you might be thinking there's no way to mitigate this or stop this, but as you've seen through the monastery, the crypt, and different other locations we've gone through, there are ways to actually drop the blood pool down. In most cases, those are going to come back to using runes in order to drop the blood count down. You're going to need to strategize as to how to get this blood pool down to ensure that this doesn't get too out of control, because that final confrontation will be that much tougher if you don't. So let's go ahead and roll the moon die, find out what Noctis is doing now, and we're adding 1 to this. It's gone right off the camera there almost. 9, so it's going to go to a 10, which is a new blood collector. We moved at night, so it'll be a +1 to this hex roll. We got a hex, which is going to be a 7. That's going to bump that blood collector in the village at 2 up to a 3. Now this is getting into dangerous territory. If I don't head back to that village and deal with these blood collectors, the next time that increases, the village will fall and that blood collection will continue and I will not be able to stop it. At this point in the playthrough, we are going to pivot and talk about the end game, and that's an end game that none of us want to happen in terms of hero death. And yes, it can happen, but within the true solo rules, there is a saving grace for you. So when you die the very first time when playing true solo, you're going to increase the blood pool by 5. Then you're going to draw and gain a random greater aspect and move your hero to the nearest village. The second time that you die, you are then dead forever. At that point, you lose the game. Now, another way hypothetically to be playing solo, which I'm not doing in this video, but I've done it in my previous entries with HEXplore, controlling other characters, in other words, 2 or more. And in those situations, the first thing you're going to do when a hero dies is you're going to roll for a greater aspect. And it's detailed right here. So each time a hero dies, if no other game effect grants them a greater aspect, roll the moon die and consult the table at the right to see if they gain one. If they do, the hero is revived to full vitals at the end of the villain phase and gains the greater aspect listed. If you do not gain a greater aspect, your hero is considered to be dead. You can see over here that roll is going to give you a hex. It's going to be a ghost, 2 is reanimated, 3 is zombie, and 4 to 10 is nothing gained. Now, this is where things change a little bit in terms of the hero death section, where it states you die if you don't get the greater aspect. Now things shift over to the keepsake. So every character or hero has a keepsake, and it states when you die, you roll the hex die. This is the next thing you can do to try to prevent death. If the result is equal to or lower than the number of defend gear upgrades you possess, you become a shade of your former self. All other heroes gain your possessions, gold, food items, gear, upgrades are lost. Adjust your ranks as needed. Flip your keepsake over and place it over your mastery descriptions. Its abilities replace your masteries, these 2 right here. And then down below it says you may reduce your stat ranks to use your keepsake powers as indicated. So you literally flip this over, it gives you some new powers. So in my case, and again, these keepsakes are all going to have differences on the back side of them. I get rejuvenate here as well as 6th sense, and it'll tell you what you need to spend in order to use them. But this card would essentially sit or rest right on top of the masteries. Other options to keep your hero alive, but in this case, it has to be in a situation where you're playing solo with 2 heroes and one of them is down because the other one is still up and available. That other hero could use Awakening Brew or Accursed Revival. These are 2 other ways that you could revive a dead hero. If you're playing true solo, though, you're not going to have those options. So you're going to bank on that first death, which is going to give you a greater aspect and allow you to bring your vitals back up and go to the nearest village, but that second death is going to be the final one. Keepsakes are not going to help you in true solo. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up this Gamefound preview series for HEXplore It, Domain of Mirza Noctis. At this point, we've covered all the major new gameplay elements, as well as touched on a number of very interesting mechanics built into this volume number 4. And if you want to see any of the prior volumes in action, I've got playthroughs of those on the channels, unboxing, and a number of other different types of content covering those games. Links for those show up throughout this entire Gamefound preview series. Hopefully this helps you make an informed decision on this one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.